As some of you may know, throughout this part of the universe there has been a very old sayings, which I guess is why they call them old sayings, and it goes more or less like this: that one can keep a secret, two, perhaps, tell three, and everyone knows. There are variations of that for thousands of years all over this planet. As always, I'm going to suggest to you that there is, beyond what seems to be the sociological reality of this in the out there part of existence, there is the basis of this. A more complex variety of this is inside of the individual nervous system. That is the nervous system of people individually and the nervous system of humanity, the individual. And it has to do with something specific on the scale of humanity. It's not sociological, it's not psychological, it's not cultural. It's got nothing to do with being able to keep gossip to yourself. It has to do with energy. It has to do with the needs of life. And the basis of it, I was going to say, is how life has got to make all pertinent health info available to all three dimensions, which you can read at times. If I don't specifically point it out, you should be able to find your own times to do so, that the three forces supporting everything at this level can also be seen as being synonyms for the three dimensions that are spatially the basis of this form of existence. Life sends all pertinent health, that is, growth information, to all three dimensions. It has got to for maximum balanced growth. And what this means is, jump as fast as you can so I don't have to do it for you all night. Of whether we're talking about individuals, whether we're apparently talking about the kind of allegories that would seem to exist in human intercourse between people, between whole groups of people, and that which takes place within the privacy of your own brain. The necessity for the maximum efficient growth of life is that all three dimensions, or all three forces, C, D, and E, remember I used to call them that, have got to have full access to whatever health information is going on, whatever the latest word is coming out from Channel 17's Dr. X, that they bring him on, and he's got the latest update on colon cancers, the latest update on having your nose plucked, whatever it is. This kind of information, the latest update, has got to be available to everyone. It can't be just available to one source, to one force, to one dimension. And what this amounts to is that all of your enemies will always be fully apprised of your position, your strengths, your weaknesses, and your plans. All info has got to be readily available. There is no way that some information can be hidden, not if it is going to be used to grow. If life is going to use it, that is going to have any lifespan past a moment. Then the idea, I remind you again, you can hear this, which you should be trying to do. You can hear this inside of your own brain, then you can hear this inside of your own circle of friends, between you and your own acquaintances, and then you can hear it amongst a whole institutionalized dance between large groups of people. And then you can hear it in regards to life itself moving within the life of life. And that is that everyone apparently has enemies. The force of growth has an enemy of evolution, has an enemy of involution. The attempt to grow and be healthy has its enemy, and all the drives, all of the possibilities, all of the bacteria, all the energies in life that can make one sick, that can kill one. So everybody has enemies, right? Protons, electrons, neutrons, everything has an enemy. There is no such thing as information that is private. The information that you might think individually that you need, that perhaps you possess, or that you should possess, that in some way will be sacred, in some way will be private, is not so. At least I'm glad to see there is not a scarcity of blank faces. Consider all the ways that life seems to go wrong with ordinary people, with you at the ordinary level. How much of life seems to be inexplicable. How much of life seems to be surprising, startling, unjust. And I'm just telling you one other way to see why it is. There can be no sacred, there can be no secret, there can be no conditional information. Whatever life at the level of humanity, at any 3D level, but the human 3D level is all we're interested in right now, any information that life needs, that is new energies going out, but it sounds like information when it gets to the area of the human brain, and that's the receiver and the transmitter and that which is churning up the energies. When it gets here, it appears to be some sort of new information. But new information does not go out to the three great dancers, the three forces, the three dimensions. Information does not go out to simply one of them. If C and D are in conflict, they are attempting to dance, and each one of them are trying to lead, and the other one's trying to resist following. Known in more primitive circles as the battle between good and evil, the battle between truth and error, the battle between correct information and wrong information, all of that. At that level, apparently somebody has got to have the upper hand. Apparently somebody does have an upper hand. And it has to be on the basis of not just superior force, but also of superior information. It's not so. There is no such thing as superior information, because for it to be superior, it would have to be exclusive. And life does not send out to one part of itself new information that is health information. It does not send out bulletins any more than you would if you found out that there was something special to do that would make you feel better. You would not decide in any way, well, I'll send this out to my lungs and the left side of my circulatory system, but I'll be damned if my colon's going to find out about this. The very thing that would seem to be useful, dangerous information to your enemies is readily available. And yet everybody walks around, quite ordinary, sophisticated, educated people, believing, not necessarily that they're in possession of some kind of transcendental, secret, mystical knowledge, but that at least they're walking around with knowledge that is indigenous and known only to them. That is, what I think, who I am, what my plans are, how I plan to handle situations with my mate, with this business deal I'm attempting to undertake. That there is something in me that is exclusive information. An ordinarily intelligent person, in fact, would tell you in business affairs, probably affairs of the heart, that a man does not, a good poker player, certainly is not, it's just foolish, is not going to just turn around and show everybody his hand. You're not going to do that. That's not the way you get by in life. That's not the way you succeed. That's not the way you even stay in the game. There are things that you and everybody else have that are private knowledge, their own thoughts, their own feelings, their own opinions, their own plans. And then people are continually, at that same ordinary level, covered with a look that would seem to be one of, ranges from horror to surprise. I've been tricked. Fate has misused me. The gods have got it in for me. Bad luck has overtaken me. How could this happen? And they do not analyze it this way, but what they're saying is, how could it happen that someone so directly thwarted my plans? That someone so specifically came in and interfered with my course of action? How could they know what I'd planned? How could they know what I wanted? It's almost as though they did. It almost makes you want to believe that there's some evil spirit going around. There is no such thing as privileged information unless it is momentary, unless it is useless, unless life is not using it. If it is a health bulletin, it's not going out simply on channel 17. It's not going to go simple with people that can afford a television, or people that happen to be home that night, people that happen to have on that channel, people that happen to be able to speak the language in which channel 17 is broadcasting. If it is a health bulletin, if it is a health bulletin, if it is good for life's health, the information goes out to everybody. All three dimensions get it: height, breadth, and depth. This does not belie the fact that the struggle going on to keep space together is that height is struggling against depth, depth is struggling against width. They're all three struggling against each other. If it were not so, if one of them could win, if it was suddenly width, we'd all be pulled down. We'd be down to some infinitesimal level. At least some people wouldn't have to worry about losing weight. We'd all be as thick as the edge of a piece of paper. It'd be pulled that way. Or if height won, we'd all be string beans going that way. If space still heading up and down. It is a struggle. Your forefathers, the more simplistic people, believe it was a struggle between right and wrong and good and evil and the gods and anti-gods and etc. But there is definitely a tension, or you would not be alive. There is a tension, as always, between inertia, centrifugal force, gravity. The forces that create the tension, the tenor of health, physically of your own body, are the same kind of forces, the same kind of struggle in ways that it's foolish to say are too numerous to enumerate. You can enumerate them because they include everything, including your attempt to enumerate them. That there is a struggle between everything. There's a struggle getting your words out. There's a struggle between the atmospheric pressure in your lungs to even speak, etc., etc. Life does not send out information unless it's about to kill something off. It does not send information out to only one of the parties, to only one of the dimensions. If it does, then you have such matters as some of you people's old friends, the dinosaurs. When something disappears, then there was a case that life did send out information to only one party, which can keep a secret. And it may have sent it to two of the dimensions, perhaps, because many times two can keep a secret. But if life had sent out the information to all three dimensions, dinosaurs would still be here. Back to the main path. If it is not about to drop something, if it's not about to sell your farm, change your diapers, wrap you up, mail you off, that is, that you're a dinosaur, that you are no longer of any use. You, some idea, some process. If it's not going to do that, then whatever the latest info is, it doesn't have to be shocking, just the latest info for the day. The energy going out, the circulation of the energy reaching the parties, the process, the people, the beings, the planets, the galaxies, wherever it is. The information that goes out is not exclusive. Now, all the dimensions having the same, in their own way, the same kind of unidirectional awareness that ordinary nervous systems have in humans, then each system believes that what it hears is the full statement of reality. That is, each dimension. So the information goes out in a non-exclusive way. It is broadcast in life's body, in this particular case, in man, through man. Height, for instance, hears only what height is tuned in to hear. So it takes its information as being exclusive, and it knows that there is other information, which is incorrect information, fallacious, spurious, evil information, wrong information. Therefore, it has, and whoever has this kind of conflicting information, which the other two dimensions to varying degrees do have it, or they'd be the same dimension as he is, if height is a he. So the other dimensions have wrong information. The other dimensions at that level are his enemy, his opposition. Who is going to fight a war if you believe that everything you do the enemy knows? Nobody. If they knew it. Of course, now I'm telling you that your enemy, no matter who it is, anything that seems to be your opposition in life, everything about you, your internal fortifications, everything, not to go, your memory, your experience, your feelings, your thoughts, your secrets, everything, all the information, all the energy that drives your nervous system, that makes you a so-called conscious being, all of that is known fully to your enemy. But, in case any of you find that disturbing, the full knowledge of your enemy is known to you, and look how good it does you. You didn't even know you knew it. Until you realize, well, yeah, I always knew that. I knew all that. Yeah, I wish I could read the mind of my competitors. I wish sometimes I could look at that woman or that man, if you're a woman. I wish I knew what was going through her mind at times like this. You do. At the leading level of the communication of information, you may not, but the information is there at the subcarrier level. If you could tune into it, of saying, I wish I knew what my competitors are thinking, but that guy, in fact, I think he purposefully, before I met him, before he went in the same business as me, he went and spent 2 or 3 years in a Zen monastery just so he could become enigmatic. He does that on purpose to me, because every time I plan to do a sale or anything, I look down the street to see if there's any signs of activity that he might be going to plan a sale or try to match me, and he'll be standing out there looking. I know it on purpose, looking enigmatic, and I don't know what's going on. Boy, if I could read his mind, but I don't get any information from him. You're wrong. And you would say, if you're ordinary, well, the man is full of secrets. Of course, we're all full of secrets. You might say, he is definitely full of secrets. I can go talk to him, he'll be friendly, and we can chat, and we'll talk about business in general, and I can't ascertain a thing from him. He keeps secrets. There are no secrets. You're saying that he has information exclusive to him, his own thoughts. No, you know what they are. The information is there at the subcarrier level. I just told you. So you didn't even hear that. But I'm going to see if I can sort of trick some of you since we're having a little difficulty. But I'm going to repeat it. All the information, you people on tape that this may be sounding a little new or strange or just getting this, it's energy, it appears to be information, but anything that falls within the activities of the human nervous system is included in this. That is information / energy that through which life is growing in a certain way through humanity amongst other creatures and processes. All information that goes out that's of any consequence, that is, that has anything to do with life's growth, if it's not just a whim, if it's not just life turning and spitting or coughing or burping or thinking, I believe I'll shave my head. No, I won't. If it is something that has any lasting effect on life, that it's using it as health information, that this is what I'm going to do until further notice. The information is non-exclusive. And when it gets down to a 3D level, let us say again for the sake of comparison that it's starting at least a 5D level. And so the parts that get down to the 3D level are taken by the 3 dimensions. And each of the 3 take the piece that they are attuned to receive as being exclusive. And any information that conflicts with that, which everybody else's information conflicts in some way or the other, to whatever height thinks about miniskirts, depth has probably either an absolute antipodal opinion or it's in some conflict. Well, I like miniskirts, but I don't approve of micro miniskirts or whatever. As long as there's another dimension, as long as there's an apparent out there to you, whether you be a human or whether you be height or breadth, as long as there's an apparent out there, you have enemies. Even when they seem to be friends, even if it's your family. I'm using enemies you've got to take now in the full sense of a kind of physics. Opposition. Healthy, necessary opposition. Your family's in opposition. Your best friend opposes you. There is no secret information, though, that if the information has gone out and it has any life that is in any way going to assist life in its growth, the information is not exclusive. It is taken by the 3 dimensions from a higher level, and each of the dimensions, that's everybody that gets it, takes their piece as being exclusive, and anything that does not concur with theirs, of course, is in some way, in varying degrees, wrong. Slightly wrong, completely wrong, and that those who are driven by such information are either all the way from misguided to just your abject enemy. But those that appear to be your enemy, those forces, those processes, those institutions that appear to be your enemy, remember this. Everything that you know, they know. And everything that they know, you know. But if you're ordinary, of course you don't know you know it. You're not attuned to it. And all you do is react to, what I was describing last time we were taping, is you react to the leading level of the info. And that's certainly not all there is. Only 48 hours ago, I thought some of you had proved the fact that if somebody even tells you that 2 and 2 is 5, that the leading information, that is, that 2 and 2 is 5, is of no consequence, it's wrong. You can look at it as being in opposition to you. That is, you're an intelligent person, you're in favor of truth, reason, and sane mathematics. And so you can look at this person and this information as being your enemy. But that is just, and in fact, of course, it's wrong information, was the general mapping I was doing last time we were taping. The information's not only wrong, it's incomplete. Because if you could pick up the sub-information, the subcarrier, at the very least, the wrongness, the apparent wrongness of the information is neutralized. Because the sub-message is, the guy saying, I can't add. Now you put that together with 2 and 2 is 5, and it's no longer wrong. Because someone who cannot add, somebody that is mathematically literate, the correct information is that if you told them, if you ask them, what's 2 and 2, it should come up 5. It should come up at least every other number in the world except. So for someone to say, you didn't hear him, but for somebody to say, hello, I can't add at all. I'm just illiterate when it comes to numbers. And you say, well, all right, let's check the validity of that information you gave me. What's 2 and 2? And they say 5. All right? The information's all fine. It all checked out, right? But if you go about it, if you approach it the way it normally flows in life, you get the leading edge first. That somebody says, hey, look here, let me tell you what. 2 and 2 is 5. And you think, God, wrong information again. Opposition. Here I'm trying to lead an upright, logical life, and I'm confronted with stuff like this. Wrong information. Enemies of intelligence. And it's not so. Because they know as much about you as you do. They know as much about the complete picture as you do, and vice versa. It's only what I sometimes call a real revolutionist. It's only such a person that can utilize the full information, that can realize that there is no wrong information, that there are no secrets, that everything that seems to be your enemy, you spread that word as far as you can, because it includes your best friends, it includes you being alive, it includes life itself, because death obviously is a part of life, and to most people death seems to be what? The ultimate bad guy, the ultimate enemy. It's after me. Old age. I'm fighting it all the time. Fighting the wrinkles, the sagging skin, fighting getting arthritis, getting stiff. That you're just surrounded by enemies. Just death itself, life itself. And it's as though, in some way, what I need is a foot up. Maybe, now that I'm getting older, maybe I'll go back and take up religion. I don't like to drink and fool around with my wife anymore as much as I used to. So yeah, that's it. I'll go back to the church. Because they got the information about how to ultimately overcome this. No, they don't. Oh, I know they appear to. That's the leading edge. It's just not complete. But if that's what you need, then people do go back, and they believe that in some way they have information that now may make them superior to the enemy. Lucifer, badness, evil, old age, death, you know, real death, the kind of death that you die and you're just kind of dead and that nobody wants to think about. There is no information that is superior to your enemies. There is no information that is exclusive to you or your enemies. If it is of any more importance than momentary to life, the information goes throughout the system. All of the dimensions, all 3 of the dimensions, all 3 of the forces, you and every possible friend, ally, foe, enemy that you have, you, humanity, whole groups of people, the information is known to all. It goes out. The energy permeates all camps, except when it gets here, what they think they received, what they thought they heard, is only a part of it, as they're supposed to. They defend, they operate on that basis, and of course you put all three of this together, like a B flat, a D, and an F, and you have a what? An A flat chord. No, don't be funny. You got the three notes, so a B flat chord, but you got to have all three. They're not in opposition. You got to have three people to dance to make this place work. I know it seems like two, but you keep forgetting the milieu. You keep forgetting the dance floor. All right, I said I was going to apparently try to change the subject. And I can apparently try to. Talking about such as this. Could drag us close enough that I could bring up, believe it or not, well, that's right, I said I was going to play like I changed the subject. So you can play like I did or not. What would seem to be the kind of myths that humanity has always had, believe it or not, regarding the kind of stuff I was just talking about, of which I've changed the subject, of course, but the kind of stuff I was just talking about. And there is a whole spreadsheet I guess I can make easy. If you took as being a wide range of myths, and by the way, remember these myths are not cultural. Myths are not sociological, they're molecular. But a good spread that might cover everything of you people's background, not culturally, although it would, but molecularly. If we took it from the Christian myths, an extension of the Greek mythology, with the Christian myths, and then into, if any of you recall, any of the great northern Germanic Norse myths, they almost run, it's almost height against depth, or width against breadth, depth. And all myths, I guess some of your forefathers would have called it religions, but let's make it myths because I was going to expand it a little bit, even for people who still may have an ear tuned to religion. I don't know what you're doing here, but all of the myths then into what seems to be religion, so if you can stay oriented for a second. All of the myths convey the message that ultimately one dimension will win. One force will win. In Christianity, of course, is the good force. The reason I was going to bring up a spreadsheet is, if any of you recall any of your readings of the old Germanic mythologies, I guess vis-a-vis Christianity, the more pagan mythologies left, if you recall any of it, their concept was that the good forces will not ultimately win. Here you have, and they even said so, it's not just I'm saying that their good forces are apparently the enemies of Christianity. It was two different worlds, two different nervous systems, more or less. But to get started, what I wanted to point out to you is that all cultures have religions. All groups of people, all individuals, whether they apparently practice it or whether they consider themselves active, because it is molecular. It's not social, not cultural, not psychological. It is molecular. It is a way in which the nervous system receives the external stimuli of the universe. And it's a way in which the nervous system conceives and perceives its internal world. But all myths contain the message appropriate to some group of people, some group of nervous systems, that is, some segment of life's body, that ultimately one of the dimensions will prevail. And of course, the corresponding, its obvious opponent, such as goodness against evilness. That whatever one force does prevail, its enemy will of course fail. What could be more reasonable almost unreachable, almost unimpeachable. But it's not true. No one force will ever prevail. And the reason I brought up my little spreadsheet is I wanted some of you to consider it, not me just talking in general about that there is no proper way to dance, and that somebody that's leading a dance now, one person, one group, one idea, that seems to be dominant, will be submissive 2 minutes later. Or if you could see it through another window looking into the ballroom, whereas you thought this thing, this one idea, this one force, this one group, was dancing forward, you can get in another window, and it just seems to be your perception has changed, your position has changed, it is now dancing backwards. I know it's mirrors and all sorts of trickery. But other than me going through that sort of thing, I was going to try and give you a more hardwired example that I thought some of you know that Christianity says. No, let's don't fool with cults and all kinds, just Christianity. It's a large group of myths. It is a big segment of energy flowing through humanity, and it comes out being called Christianity. It says that ultimately the good force will win over the bad force. And we can call it A force will triumph over Z force. We can call it height will triumph over depth. But the good force, as they call it, will triumph over the bad force. Likewise, not that great a difference in the group of people, certainly not in the horizontal age of things. Those old Norse myths of their own gods, their own afterlife, said specifically that there were good forces and bad forces. Their gods were the good force. Odin was the good, he was the head of the good guys, and they had bad guys, the giants, the ice giants. And that ultimately the bad guys were going to win. And that the good force knew it. You know, it's just the way life is. That was kind of the end of the subject. Well, it was not. Then they got into how you're supposed to live and die. But that the good force would always be, ultimately, defeated by the bad force. And I'm not going in, surely somebody's done it by now. It just struck me that going to some kind of psychological attempt to interpret this as being, well, if you lived up there in Denmark and Sweden, up by the White Sea, it was apparently the ice will finally take over everything. It'll freeze you, it'll freeze your pecker off, it'll ruin your sex life. If we were in modern days, it will freeze up all machinery. It'll, you could say, well, the badness is always going to win, but never mind that. A group of people, large groups, still having an effect. I'm not going to defend it, but look at Bayreuth and Wagner. I don't know who to blame for all of that. But at any rate, these myths are still having an effect. They just don't have religions identified basically around them. But at any rate, there are large segments of people that took up a large segment of time in the Western world that their myths, that is, that large groups of human nervous systems needed this, and that was the energy they were getting on the basis that even the gods would eventually, the good gods, the good forces would eventually, ultimately, there was no escape, that the final day of doom, the final day of judgment, even between the gods, the good forces would lose. So here on this planet, within civilized times, as it's called, you have had that wide extreme that I didn't have to make up examples from Christianity myths to Norse myths. Both of them saying that one force, without any doubt, will triumph. And it's not true. Not that it's not true that the good force won't triumph. That's not true. Not that it's not true that the bad force won't triumph, because that's not true. No one force will ever triumph, for if it did, it's curtains for everybody. That means life has died. There is no one force that can ever triumph. And yet, look, the human nervous system, collectively and individually, is wired and primed in such a way that this is surely beyond heresy. It's beyond insanity. This is not even worth thinking about. Because you got your choice. You don't have to be Norse-based or Christianity-based. You can just be an individual agnostic, heathen, free spirit. And yet your own nervous system says, well, the good guys are winning. Or you may think, Bad guys are winning. And thus it always be, thus it will be forever. And so you are either a Odin follower or a Christianity follower, and you don't know it. That is, you believe that one force, and believe is not even the word, you got no choice, but you believe, you accept, you're driven, that one force will ultimately triumph. Do you understand, do you even get a hint that if I'm telling you, if I'm conveying through words a certain piece of erratic energy, not necessary for ordinary sustaining of human life, what effect that would have on everything that your brain ordinarily thinks? Because your brain ordinarily thinks not just necessarily in some sort of apparent realm of morality of good and evil, but you believe that good intentions will ultimately triumph, or else good intentions won't triumph over habit. Or your good desires, your good hopes for your fellow man will either eventually triumph in some way. The gods or cosmic forces will help you, and by you being charitable and thinking good thoughts about people that you actually hate and deserve it, but you're trying to, that some way that'll win, or else it won't win. That none of that's pertinent. That is, whether it will succeed or not succeed, whether the gods are going to win or whether the ice giants are going to win. Nobody's going to win. Do you understand? You get just a chill anywhere in your spine, at least up here, what that would do to the normal operations of your brain. That no force, no one single dimension will ever triumph. And everything about the human nervous system into the brain is wired and primed. In fact, it could not operate were it not in contradistinction and not if it were not in opposition to what I just said. Well, that's just foolish, because one force will ultimately win. It ultimately wins today. It ultimately wins in every little contest. And of course, if you're going to be philosophical, I'm going to tell you, it will ultimately win the big battle, the final battle. Everybody, there's no level of ordinary thought by which one could escape that. And yet I'm saying it's not true. And some of you should be able to get a chill of it already. I'm just telling you the stuff I've said before in a new way. There is no ultimate victor of any one dimension. If it happened, don't come crying to me, because we're all going to be kaput, including life. It'll all be over. But as long as life is alive, our life, as long as life is living, no one dimension will ever triumph. But I repeat one more time in case you were missing. Everything about ordinary thought is wired in such a way to be in absolute opposition to that. And it's beyond absolute opposition, because it wouldn't even think about this. And if I made it hear me for a second, they'd just go listen and go, it's not even worthy of much of a retort. It just can't be true, because if it were true, life wouldn't exist. Life wouldn't be anything like we think. What have I said? Oh. Since I brought it up, may I suggest to you further, it has nothing to do with myths, and it has really nothing to do with psychology and blah, blah, blah. But the story is running. As we set up, or I have by bringing up these stories that are extant. I didn't make them up. They're reflections of the need of life in certain areas, in its own life, in its own nervous system, specifically in man, of this wide range. There's in fact a splendid dichotomy of the Christian myths and these old Norse Germanic myths that are in such opposition. A little more specifically, as much as I started, but I'm talking about energy now. I'm going ahead and use their descriptions. But any of you who may remember some of the crudeness, like their afterlife. Christianity, of course, has heaven, the old Grecian idea of the Elysian fields, it's all bright and it's all happy, that is the afterlife of good forces, that is of good people, people who did the good thing. The Norse gods, the Norse myths had their own afterlife, but it was nothing like that. By all reports, it was dark, it was cold, it was gloomy. Even within their afterlife, the specific place where the good people went, not just a general heaven, whatever they called it, Asgard, or where it was. But anyway, specifically, the one that most people hear about, you've heard the term, was Valhalla, the Hall of the Slain. That's where the big king, the good god, Odin, there he sat. And if you had been a good person, you went there. You were, at least figuratively, a slain hero, or you wouldn't be there. You did the good thing. But inside that hall, it was dark. It was gloomy, because everybody, including God, they called him Odin, but Jehovah, Zeus, if we were still in Greek myths, even he knew that there was an ultimate battle coming, and that he and everybody else was going to lose. That he and all of these heroes, the good people, had already died and were there with him, eating, sitting around, just one big banquet, but all they're doing is waiting because the big battle is coming, and they all know it. And they all know, it's already determined, that the evil force will win. That is the final wrap-up of human existence. But what they considered was this: since you're going to die, even after you're dead, you're doomed to die, but you're doomed to die defeated. There is no way the good guys will win. I mean, there's no possibility. The only choice is this: is to die like a hero, or to try to escape it, which you can't, but to try and escape. And the closest thing that they seem to perceive as being any sort of power of good, I know that their gods they could change the birds and fly around, they had all kinds of powers, but that's nothing when you're lacking the power to ultimately defeat your enemies, which they lacked, and they knew it. That when the big battle comes, we're going to lose. We're all doomed. We will all be defeated. Their God knew that. All the people there in the hall with him, all the slain heroes already that were good and got here instead of the bad place, they all knew, well, ultimately, we're going to die with the gods themselves. It's all going to be racked up, taken over by the bad forces. There's no way out. The closest thing that good force had to any power was the power to die knowingly and heroically in a lost cause. Literally. Because it was a lost cause. That must be where the term came from. Because there was no choice. It wasn't a let's plan, let's see if we can't get out of it. The God, Odin himself, knew when it starts, we're doomed. Our choice is, if we got one, to try and get away, which we can't, snivel, beg for mercy, anything other than to die knowing that it was a lost cause and to be able to laugh about it. That was heaven. That was their form of heaven. The good afterlife. Without me playing kindergarten, which I may do in a minute anyway, does anybody see any living significance, pertinence inside of your own nervous system, whether you've read that before or not, whether you believe you have even a drop of Norse or Anglo-Saxon blood in you? Do you feel that that reality is in you? You may have a reality in you, that is, you may have molecular activity inside your own solar system up here that on a good day goes, yeah, I'll be rewarded for not only all my good works, but my good intentions, which, of course, do not necessarily merge with my good works, but I had good intentions. And I'm sure that there is a God in heaven, that is, good forces will prevail. And at other times, whether you ever heard of Odin or the Norse myths, at other times you were sitting there in those cold, dark halls of Valhalla like I've done the best I can. I've already died several times in this life doing the best I can. So what's awaiting me? A final defeat. That is, the bad forces are going to win. I just know it. There's no doubt about it. That comes out at the three-dimensional level as various forms of human behavior. It seems to be different forms of human personality, different forms of human disposition. Pessimist as opposed to optimist. And of course, anybody that belongs in this, you've got your own population of pessimists in you, and you have their opposing group of optimists on the other side of the park. Consider a little more specifically for a minute. what I brought up about the Norse idea is that even the good forces, the sea force, height, depth, whatever we want to call it, but the good force at that time, even the good force, is ultimately doomed to defeat. Doomed. Can any of you see a connection? And then remember what I said, they're only, rather than just being frozen into absolute inaction, instead of being frozen into some kind of Calvian or Knoxian frozen engine of predetermination, which didn't even affect Christianity that much. But rather than that happening, there sits Odin, the slain warriors, all the heroes, facing the ultimate, once again, death, but it's going to be the ultimate death, absolute doom. That's their reward for being on the side of good. The closest they've got to some power is to do it heroically. Is to laugh as you're dying, to put it crudely. Not cynically, because you can't be cynical if you're not surprised. You can't be cynical unless you think there's an alternative. And remember, according to their tales, there was no doubt. Odin, the head guy, he didn't go out, he didn't go beg for mercy, he didn't go look for a secret information. Insofar as the ultimate battle, it was a known that we're going to lose. I'm the head of good, he told everybody, I guess. And in case none of you can feel it or figure it out, when the big day comes, we're going to lose to the giants. Nothing else to say, we're going to. The way in which they were going to lose, though, I was going to ask you, can any of you see any connection with something I was mentioning last time we were taping, having to do with a merger between aim and execution, having to do with a unknown, impossible at the ordinary level, merger between action and outcome, to where there's no longer any difference. Well, I could hope. Well, if any of you get a glimpse of that, then, I didn't point out the obvious, but plenty of people's nervous system should have heard it, to jump on those kind of stories I was attributing to the Norse mythologies and saying, well, that's some kind of fatalism. They're just saying, well, we're going to die anyway, so why not go out whistling and drinking, having and laughing at our enemies? So what? That's just some kind of Spartan, stoic, fatalistic something or other. At the ordinary level, it certainly sounds like that, especially to those that have a nervous system primarily run on the fuel of Christianity and Western myths, or Eastern Mediterranean myths. But instead of hearing the story like that as some kind of fatalism, what if you could hear this, that is, that they knew they were doomed, and the closest they figured, according to their myths, that a person could actually exercise any kind of will, that is, that it even resembles, we're the good guys, right? The only way it even resembles, we know we're going to lose, right? Right. All right, the only way that us good guys even approach an idea of triumph is to triumph in defeat. That is, to heroically face the inevitable, absolutely inevitable, and do it heroically. Not just march off as cannon fodder, but knowing you're going to be defeated, go out there and fight like a damn maniac. All right, instead of hearing it that way, can none of you see a connection between me saying there is a kind of merger that a revolutionist has got to find? Well, it certainly would help you. Wherein there is not a difference between defeat and not defeat. There's not a difference saying, well, we're going to be doomed anyway, right? Right. Well, why fight it? Why not just lay here and let them come in and cut our throats? Well, that sounds reasonable. At least you probably have a few extra drinks or maybe get laid once or twice more than going out there and fighting when you know you're going to lose, when you know it. It's inevitable. So it would sound better, but there's still them talking about there's a difference between the intention and the execution. That is, there's a difference in us being the good guys and the good guys winning. We should win. We have decency and goodness and the Norsean way of life in our hearts, and the giants are going to kill us. We're going to be defeated. That us being good is in some way separate from what should happen to good. It's no different than height saying, I know I'm right. I know there's some conflicting directions in this world. I know there's the one that goes that way and there's one that goes back that way. But, you know, as always, I'm right. Height is the good way to be. But the way things are going, I can't seem to actually get the final upper hand. I can't seem to drag them all in this direction. You end up as you're supposed to, in real, and then up here, what some people would classify as being imaginary struggles with the other dimensions. Of the good guys, the slain warriors, the heroes there in Valhalla, knowing as soon as the battle starts, when we go out, even with our good king, we're doomed to defeat. Therefore, blank, 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 dot, dot, dot. Therefore, anything. Therefore, do I have to do it? All right. Therefore, I think so-and-so about that. We're doomed to defeat. Therefore, I'm going to lay down and cry. We're doomed to defeat. Therefore, I'm going to ask for my money back. We're doomed to defeat, so therefore, I'm going over and see if I can join up with the other side. We're doomed to defeat. Therefore, at least I'm going to insult Odin before we go. Why'd he get me here? Anything. It doesn't matter what you fill in. The point is, you still have the correct separation between the intention, between the aim, and the execution. There is still a gulf between the idea and the action. Whereas if they're merged, is why I'm suggesting to you, they didn't understand it in a complex way, but that is what the heroic, inevitable death is. That is the victory through defeat. And if some of you are really sharp, I'd suggest to you that on a little more subtle level is what's going on, to take the other extreme in my examples of the Christian myths of the death and resurrection. It's victory through defeat. That first off, it seems as though Jesus, being the hero of the Christian myth mainly, that there he was a god. And what happened to him? Same thing is going to happen to Odin. They hung him up and killed him, and he went out cursing. At any rate, he died. That was it. Yeah. But later he won. That is, the good force finally succeeded. It was because he in some way triumphed over death. The Norse stories are a little more direct from a certain view, that good is going to ultimately, inevitably, be eaten up by the ice, by the gloom, the destruction, the bad force. But it doesn't matter which way you look at it, you are apparently caught into that as long as the intent, that is, I'm trying to be a good guy, I'm trying to be a good force, I'm trying to be a Christian, I'm trying to be a good Swede. But in some way trying to do that is separate from success. As long as you do that, you're always defeated. Whether it looks that way or not. Because you are still tied to the train of thought that one force, whatever it be, good or evil, doesn't matter, but that one force will ultimately win. And there's no doubt about that, right? There's every doubt in the world about that. Now, I'm, of course, understand, because I told you no one force will ever triumph. And I'm suggesting that is what is hidden behind all these resurrection stories from Christianity and everywhere else, and such things as these kind of Norse myths, that even the heroes are ultimately defeated, except their triumph is in being defeated in a heroic way. That is getting very close, in a certain way closer than the Christian myths. It doesn't matter, but I'm saying it in a kind of subtle way, it's getting closer to a merging. Don't you hear? That the good guys, including the good God, is sitting there, and he knows, everybody knows, but he knows there's nothing in the world he can do, the bad guys are going to win. And he still struggles. He still fights, and he still goes down swinging and laughing. That, in a subtle way, is getting closer to merging intent, aim, and execution itself. Fighting losing battles, knowingly. With no second thought. No, well, I know this is a losing battle, so I'm going to hold back at least 10%. Or I won't show up until the last minute. Anything, it doesn't matter what you fill in there. You are keeping what seems to be action and outcome separate. That is, that my actions are not going to have any effect on the outcome. Which, of course, from another view can be, well, my actions are going to have every effect on the outcome, which is a general Western view of free will, and etc. But it doesn't matter which one it is. That's why I picked out those two examples. as strange and far removed as they sound of Christian myths from those Norse myths. It's the same thing as saying, well, it doesn't matter what I do because everything's preordained. That's the same thing as saying, well, it does matter what I do. Things are not absolutely preordained. There's no difference in the two. No difference whatsoever. It'll still get the job done. It's like we're talking about two different forms of, we're either talking about gasoline or gasohol, or running off pig farts in some way you could get down your gas tank. It's the same thing. It is only a kind of merger that would be the heroic of apparently taking defeat and turning it into triumph, which is not the point, but it is a merger wherein the two things that would seem to be so absolutely irreconcilable, such as the good being defeated by the bad, and yet you can still triumph, since it's inevitable, if you go down like a hero. If you go down fighting as though none of this were true, that is, that we will inevitably lose. And of course, in one view, three-dimensionally, you will inevitably lose. Death is going to take you. So, but there's some way out. Right. Yeah. See? There you are. Now you are in Valhalla, whether you know it or not. You're just waiting for the inevitable and you don't know it. It doesn't matter what position it is. It doesn't matter which of these general two main trunks of energy are running through your nervous system regarding what you should do, what is possible to be done. As long as there is a separation, as long as to you that, well, yes, I believe it's important to do good. In fact, I believe it's important to be a Christian. That seems to be basically culturally, psychologically, that seems to be the greatest umbrella to help people do right. So what I'd like to do is lead a Christian life. We could be Jewish or anything else, but I'm using that in a wide Western sense. And the guy says, everybody says, I'd like to do that. I believe in it. I encourage others to. I give money to it. But of course, as our church says, whatever your church is, it says this. As the church says, no one can actually be a Christian. Now, all you can do is try, which is the same thing. You don't hear it? It's Odin saying, well, you guys did good and you got here, but let me tell you what. There's another battle coming, and we're all going to be defeated, including me. It's the same thing. To say, well, you can do the best you can, but it won't be good enough. Because there is no God but God. There is no Allah but Allah. There is no perfect man except Jesus. They're still saying the intent will never catch up with the outcome. Your aim will never catch up with your desire. That is, you can't do whatever it is that you think you can do. The heroic death. The heroic merger. Think about it. Now here it is. Odin and all the good guys. The final battle, and there they go down. All of them, just as they knew, just as everybody knew. The bad guys know it. The good guys know it. Everybody knows it. They're going to lose. But if you lose, if you were doomed, if you were defeated, which you are constantly, and as I said, at the 3D level, you're absolutely going to be defeated by death at this level. But you go down laughing and fighting as though it did not matter. I don't mean just carelessly, insouciantly, but you're fighting as though at any minute now the tide can turn when you knew it couldn't, when the enemy knows it can't. And you still go down as though none of that existed. You do not hear that as being a kind of absolutely extraordinary merger. You can't hear that on another level, that everything you believe to be true, everything you believe to be correct, everything you think about you, and then everything that opposes it, all of that which is trying to defeat you psychologically, if you could merge with that, even when you apparently were defeated, you're talking about an extraordinary condition then. You're talking about a form of real heroism. Or may I suggest you're talking about perhaps what I keep trying to call the revolution.